So it seems that we've got some rather big and surprising Warhammer 40k box set and sprue leaks. The Thousand Sons Battle Force seems like it's going to be at a lower price than initially expected. There's the potential that Games Workshop might have teased the name of another Death Guard character in their Codex organisation, and there's a few more bits and pieces that look like genuine new parts from their Horus Hearsay teasers. Let's do a roundup of a bunch of 40k news. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're doing a roundup of a fair few 40k small teasers and reveals, things that maybe didn't really need a video all to themselves, but I still found interesting enough to talk about on the channel, leading with these big new 40k box leaks. Speaking of which, let's talk about that first. There's this one for this rather conspicuous Dawn of War box set, and then there's two more as well, both of which are showing some individual sprues for things that Games Workshop have already revealed but haven't been released yet. And as you can see here, all shot in glorious potato cam. Basically, it seems that this trio of 40k leaks have been doing the rounds on the internet. It was tweeted by one person and then Mr. Valrak made a video about it, though to my understanding that tweet wasn't the original source. I was sent a direct link to the images prior to that coming out as well, seemingly from someone completely unrelated. Mysterious origins aside though, this one is a real leak, and it basically looks like an unrevealed tie-in box game for a new Dawn of War game potentially. As best I can tell from that, it looks like it could be called Dawn of War Onslaught maybe. A nice Blood Raven on the cover, as you'd expect from that real-time strategy game series. A bunch of counters, bases, Space Marine character cards, dice, and then a bunch of other cards as well. The sprue itself is an existing one, though it's basically been made in red plastic, and that does make it look like it's aimed to be one of Games Workshop's sort of intro game style things, maybe one of the ones that they tend to have in say Target stores in the USA and similar. And they can often be kind of interesting deals for the 40k miniatures inside them, depending on the eventual price tag. The sprue itself is a known one, and I'll get to that in a second, but basically the implications of this is that there could be a new Dawn of War game, and if this box set is out, then potentially announced fairly soonish. No idea whether it would just be an entirely new title in the series, or perhaps a remaster of one of the original ones maybe. I certainly have very fond memories of the first three. I think they were all good in their different ways. I enjoyed the story and feel of both the first and second one, and I really quite enjoyed the campaign system of the third one. I wound up playing that one from the perspective of every single army that you could. Would certainly be very interested to see a new title in that series, if this really is the implication of that. As for the models, the sprue itself is an existing one. It's miniatures from the Indomitus box set, sold as the Honoured of the Chapter box. It's the one with the Judas here, the Space Marine Chaplain, the monoposed but very cool Blade Guard, and their Blade Guard Ancient with a great big banner and 3 Eradicators. In general, these were pretty well received miniatures as they go, and it still seems that the sprue is at least a fairly popular one to buy. At least when I've looked into discount things, it seems to be one of the more purchased ones by people. Maybe a little bit surprising in its own way, as it's basically combat patrol prices for not that many miniatures at all. Though I guess you do get some interesting characters, such as the only place to get the Judas here, who's quite a fun one, and I must admit I do quite like the sculpts for them. Looks like it's been remade in red plastic, presumably to tie in with the Blood Ravens, and it could potentially mean that the box could be an interesting one if it's less than the big £100 or $168 price tag. I think there's a pretty reasonable chance that it might be. I feel like these box games often tend to retail for far below that, and if that does turn out to be the case, that could be an interesting place to pick up these miniatures. If you do have them nearby in a local Target or something when it comes out, could be worth waiting and seeing if you did have your eye on them maybe. In any case, definitely looks pretty intriguing, both for the prospect of Dawn of War itself, and maybe for the Space Marine contents. Certainly a bit of a surprising leak to come out of Games Workshop so early. I wonder how long this will be before this one's properly revealed. As mentioned though, that wasn't the only one in terms of the sprue picture leaks. It looks like alongside it, there's also the Chaos Knight sprue, and it does look like a legitimate one as well. You can see the Dark Flame Lance that was previewed around about 12 hours ago now, and also the sort of tri-lobed bits for the big siege drill that it has. All in a pile of sprues next to some transfers and the Knight instructions. Kind of interesting for the timing of this one in particular, coming out literally just after Games Workshop revealed the full model reveal. Finally, we've also got a look at the new drop pod sprue. These are the ones that Games Workshop announced they'd reconfigured recently, basically coming with 2 in a box set, but no longer having the option to mount the doors open or closed. Looks like the base of the drop pod is one fairly enormous big flat piece of plastic, and then it doesn't look like that's quite enough to assemble a full pod on one frame. It still does look like they're fairly big weighty constructions. I guess in this format maybe treated a bit more akin to scenery as opposed to models that you can dynamically open and close and things. There were definitely a fair few people who didn't like that, though I must admit I wasn't a big fan of the old drop pods myself either. I think it was probably one of my least favourite models to build and paint out of the ones that I have. In any case, not really too much of a leak, but interesting to see there's sprue pictures of the drop pod out in the wild. Before we move on to box set prices, Death Guard unit teasers, and glimpses of Horus Hearsay, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in the Magnet Baron, suppliers of all things neodymium based in the USA. Magnetising things is certainly a big part of my hobby. Perhaps some of my most successful ones that I've done are my magnetised Lehman Rosses and Imperial Knights. They're just particularly good for big kits with massive amounts of options that you could want to vary either game to game or when Games Workshop updates the rules. The Magnet Baron basically sells every size and shape of magnets available, plus has a whole bunch of dedicated parts for certain Warhammer 40k kits out there. Some fancy ones like this Questoris Knight one where you're able to magnetise all options without drilling, coming supplied with a whole bunch of 3D printed components, though they also have a bunch of other ones that are more standard. They've got plenty of other things though, flight stand bundles to be able to magnetise grav tanks or jump infantry onto bases like this, flush fit magnets to be the right height as Citadel bases, and also glue application tools and drills and things. In any case, feel free to check them out, links down in the video description, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. Moving on to round up some other 40k things over the past few days. First up, it looks like the price of the Warframe Thrallbound Battle Force box set for the Thousand Suns is significantly lower than the Death Guard and the World Eaters ones for some reason. Looks like this one's gone back to the price tag for the Battle Force box sets last year, like the Agents of the Imperium one, they were also $210. Basically, it looks like this one's $30 cheaper than the Death Guard and World Eaters, as they were both $240. Looking at the theoretical numbers and estimating the Sekitar robots, it did seem that the Warframe one would have a lower theoretical discount versus the other two, but even so, this one's really quite a big drop. $30 is an eighth of the price, and that's pretty good news for people who did already have their sights on the box set. It did seem like at least a fairly popular one, both having probably the most core units for the Thousand Suns in the Rubrics, Scarabs and Sorcerers, and then having 2 copies of 2 of the new robots. I've not seen official prices shared for pounds or euros, but looks like it'll be around about £135 or 170 euros or so, just roughly translating the dollar price. I believe World Eaters and Death Guard were more like 150 or 190. Let me know your thoughts on that in any case. Would you be any more tempted to pick it up or not? And as ever, if you are looking to pre-order them, feel free to check out the channel discount affiliate links in the video description when the pre-orders go live on Saturday. Next up, one other interesting thing that I saw going around Reddit was a potential future teaser for Death Guard. And after giving it a quick search, it's kind of interesting to see that there's a whole bunch of Death Guard characters that have been mentioned by name since they first turned up in 8th edition that might or might not be new characters or potentially just names in the lore. What makes this interesting is that we've just had a good example of a Death Guard character that's been mentioned in the lore and then had a model made for him. We had the Lord of Poxes, whose name has been a thing since the 8th edition codex I believe, and then only in 10th edition does he wind up getting a model, literally around about 8 years difference I think. In any case, on the Death Guard subreddit, I saw this page from the codex posted, basically someone having it highlighted a Cadaverous Famine Bringer and also a Super Heavy Plague Tower, both listed as regular units alongside a massive array of other Death Guard units making up this particular Vectorium. Aside from a few fleet assets, the vast majority of the rest of them are playable units in-game. They list things like the Foul Blightspawn, Biologist Putrefier, Chaos Land Raiders, Blightlord Terminators, and plenty more. In any case, next to the support characters, there's the name Cadaverous Famine Bringer mentioned, which sounds very in line with Games Workshop Death Guard naming conventions, and when I gave that a search, it looks like it has been a thing since 2018 when Dark Imperium and the Death Guard Codex came out, basically a subclass of Death Guard Psyker, apparently mentioned alongside other lovely names such as the Slotmaw Maggot Mancer and Festering Pox Shaman. Apparently these are all types of Death Guard Psyker. I don't know if they will just permanently be represented by the Malignant Plague Caster, but I did just find it kind of interesting that they all have specific unique names, and we have just had the example of the Lord of Poxes get a miniature when he was only mentioned in name only before. I wouldn't be suspecting this edition or anything though, just could be an option for, say, an individual character release for 11th edition or something. And I guess at least on paper something like a Terminator Sorcerer could be a pretty credible option for them, given that Games Workshop removed the regular one now. Death Guard's roster is certainly pretty bloated with lots of minor support characters though. I kind of feel like anything else might be a bit more exciting for them. Otherwise, interesting to see those super heavy plague towers mentioned as well. I would be kind of surprised if Games Workshop came out with a super heavy kit that's basically a fortification. That just doesn't really seem to be in their modus operandi these days, but interesting to see as part of their force organisation. Next up, for teasers and reveals, Games Workshop have updated their Horus Hearsay hype campaign. The kind of weird, slightly non-announcement type thing to build hype for the Horus Heresy 3rd edition. It started with that short office sketch, then 3 teaser pictures, all of which turned out to be wrong in some way. A flawless blade sprue coloured green, a dreadnought that vaguely looks like a Leviathan without a knee pad, and a very CGI looking 18-sided dice. It probably loosely translates as a new edition with some focus on salamanders, and maybe some kind of new dreadnought, though any of the actual specifics they've shown off seem kind of unlikely. It did look like they basically set up their social media feeds and things to be able to share updates for that, and that's what they've done now. Looks like they've uploaded another couple of batches of dubious looking teasers with some misleading discussion alongside them. But from what they appear, at least these ones do look like actual new miniature parts this time around, as opposed to just taking photos and doing silly things with previous sprues. In any case, with their next batch of teasers, first up they've got this number 2 in a little target. As best I can tell, that does look like a new part, though not necessarily for Horus Heresy. The styling perhaps looks a bit more similar to 40k or Kill Team if anything. They also seem to have been putting a lot of 18s in these teasers as well, and then saying maybe they hint to the salamanders, maybe they don't. Next up, they've got what looks like a bit of Space Marine armour with maybe a small shield generator bit in it. It looks like quite a small part as it's quite well zoomed in. I say it maybe looks a bit like a Crux Terminatus, though it doesn't really look quite like one without the skull and things. I believe they didn't have those in the Heresy anyway. Then finally for the image teasers, there's one that looks like it's an ammo pouch that could genuinely be for the Horus Heresy. Perhaps looks like some sort of demo charge in a pouch. I must admit I'm not super familiar with Horus Heresy units. Feel free to chip in the comments if you know any of their Space Marine units that might use these sort of grenades. Otherwise, beyond that, they posted a whole bunch of random text teasers, basically saying a bit about salamanders and white scars for some reason, and then random slightly contradictory rules things which probably aren't right. Doesn't look like there's quite so much interest in these ones, unless they have some sort of big surprise announcement ahead of time. Seems pretty possible they could do a Horus Heresy preview show at the Dallas Open, which is on the 22nd of May, so maybe we'll continue to get a lot more from this website up till then. Otherwise, for a few more small things I saw in passing, it was pointed out to me on the Discord server that Leagues of Votann got a tiny FAQ. I was wondering if any stealth ones might have slipped in as Games Workshop updated the FAQs for World Eaters and Death Guard and Emperor's Children. By the way that their app's formulated, armies that currently have indexes wouldn't have been very obvious. This one could be at least a fairly big deal for Leagues of Votann armies, as it's basically ruling on whether or not all the units marked with the judgment tokens at the start of the game count as ones that you can kill to gain your command point rewards with their whole ruthless efficiency thing. They changed that slightly in the balance update to give at least some of the judgment tokens handed out to other detachments as well. And in the process maybe implied that if you didn't kill the ones that were marked by the detachment rule as opposed to the army rule, you wouldn't get the command point reward, but basically this says that no, that's not the case, and it still works as before. Destroy any of those double judgment marked units and you get the command point rewards. It seems they still haven't updated the field manual or any of the other download documents this week. I guess they probably won't be too far away to do that. The Death Guard, World Eaters and Emperor's Children points and changes all went live on the app, I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday, and there's been about a 5-day delay so far between them actually releasing the digital download documents. It's not often that the app's quite that far ahead of the digital things. Finally, for a quick roundup of a few more things, Fully Knight Ruinator revealed a little while ago. Seems that I made a mistake in the previous video, and I thought that that new faceplate was a completely new one when in fact it's an existing one. I probably should have double checked that, though I feel like usually when they release these Knight variants they have at least some sort of aesthetic difference between them. It does seem that they're maybe being a bit more stingy for this one, and instead use the entire sprue for weapons and things, as opposed to aesthetic upgrades. I did see a few people pointing out that it looks like Games Workshop might have put on this Knight part backwards as well. I believe that cabling is supposed to go on the back of the arm, not the front of the arm, though to be honest isn't the most obvious thing in the world. I think I managed to do that with my own Knights at least once and then needed to correct it. Otherwise, for some smaller 40k reveals, there were a couple of new books revealed. A Corsair Voidscarred novel by Mike Brooks. This one reportedly pitting Eldar Corsair pirates versus orcs, presumably some freebooters, in a battle of piracy of some sort. And there's an anthology of Sisters of Battle stories, 7 of them to a bit longer than the rest. They revealed a few merch swag boxes for people attending their open tournaments, presumably costing really quite a lot more over the regular tournament tickets. Looks like they've got some objective markers, a range gauge, a notebook and a bunch of other counters and things. And then as well as the Thousand Suns going on pre-order this week, also these frogs will be going up for pre-order on Saturday, presumably live on the Games Workshop web store at the same time as the Thousand Suns pre-orders go live. So if you've been looking forward to getting these frogs, then now's the time. There's also some Wood Elves from the Old World being released alongside the frogs as well. I'll leave that there for now though. Let me know what you make of the 40k leaks, the Thousand Sons box set prices, Death Guard leaks and Horus Heresy teasers. Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments below. As mentioned earlier, a big thank you to the Magnet Baron for sponsoring the video. Feel free to check them out, links down in the video description if you'd like some neodymium supplies. They've got magnets of all shapes and sizes, plenty of them specifically sized up for various different 40k kits. Some starter set magnet bundles with a bunch of drills, a pin vise, super glue and some magnets to get you started as a one-stop shop if you want to jump into that part of the hobby. Flush ship magnets to go under model bases for transport and these flying base stands as well to help stop those slender plastic rods from snapping off too much. In any case, a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. You can check them out linked in the video description. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular Warhammer 40k videos coming with new ones out just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel with any 40k purchases you might be making in the near future, the affiliate discount links are in the video description and there's the channel Patreon page there as well if you'd like to help support directly. A big thank you to any who are. But in any case though, an enormous thank you for listening and I'll hope to see you guys next time.